Welcome to Shop Talk. My name is Whitney from Thrifty Whitney, and I'm one of your co-hosts for this amazing monthly live series of classes that we bring for vintage resellers. So if you're watching this on YouTube or you're listening on Spotify, thank you so much. These happen once a month right here on Instagram Live, and then we post the replays to YouTube, Spotify, and Instagram so that you can watch and replay as much as you want. We are so thankful for everyone who joins into these lives. And today, my co-host Nicole from Vintage Haven Shop will be coming on. And then we're also going to be joined by a very special guest, too, actually, my Reseller Genie. And we are going to talk all about bookkeeping, accounting, finances. It's going to be a great discussion. If you are not able to watch the whole thing, then don't worry. We will have the replays available. I'm going to bring on my guest real quick. Looks like here in a minute as well. So if this is your first Shop Talk that you've ever watched, I'd love to hear in the comments. So just comment down below and tell me where you're joining from. Good morning, Nicole.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm so excited. Okay, and I know that I saw Paul and Faith pop on. Let me see. Unable to join. Okay. Hey, Paul and Faith, if you will just, sometimes it does this, if you will just exit Instagram and then come back in, let's see if that works. Because like I said, sometimes these, you just have to like get out and come back in, and then whatever the tech issue is gets fixed. First, Shop Talk. Wonderful. I'm so glad you're here. So I'm also going to put a little comment down here. So we have kind of an outline in general outline that we're going to go through. And oh, great, from California. And we also have collected a lot of questions from Instagram from everyone about bookkeeping. And so towards the end, we will go through those questions. And then we will also collect questions from down below. If you see the little speech bubble that has a question mark in it, if you put your question in there as we go along, it's way easier for us to be able to answer those questions and keep track of them, because if it's in the comment stream, then it does tend to be lost. I'm just messaging Paul and Faith to make sure they're able to get on there.
So like what Whitney was saying, if you add your question in the comment bar, like when people join and then other people comment, then we might lose your question. So if you put it right like in the comment, like the question box, then we'll be able to keep track of them and pull them up one by one and go over them at the end.
Okay. All right. Oh, wait, I think they're, yes. Okay. And let me pin that comment real quick. All right. And then if you guys also comment replay, this doesn't work on YouTube or Spotify. Hello. But if you comment replay, then Robot Whitney will send you links for YouTube and Spotify. So,
oh, we have
here we go.
Special guests today.
We're just trying to get set up. We tried to join from our computer. I think that was the problem. So now we're on our phone. We're just trying to make sure that we are both seen here. So sorry about that.
Yay.
Okay.
That's totally fine. Okay. And maybe we'll have you guys step back just a little bit from the camera so we can both get you guys, or at least right now I'm seeing half of each of your faces.
Yes.
There we go.
That
Oh, wonderful. Okay. So I'm just getting everyone oriented to Shop Talk. We always have, our little spiels in the beginning. The first thing you guys need to do, and this is super important, is go up to this little caret and follow all 3 accounts. That way, when Robot Whitney sends you links and things, because I have actually a lot of things we're going to share today, if you are not following me, it goes off in like La La Land, and you may not see my messages. So make sure you hit follow Nicole, and then make sure you follow my Reseller Genie so that you can see more accounting tips, okay? Like I said, you can comment replay, and you'll get links for Spotify and YouTube to watch this later. And like I said, it looks like we already have a question down there. There's a question bubble at the bottom. That is where you put your questions. But we love for you to comment, engage, tell us your own experiences. Those comments do not show up on the replays. So you can tell us all your deepest, darkest secrets, and they're not going to be recorded for eternity. And this is going to be so great. Okay, so we are going to get started. Paul and Faith, before we dive into bookkeeping, tell us a little bit about you and your business.
All right, yeah, I'll go first. So I'm Paul. This is my wife, Faith, and
This is our baby.
yeah, this is Felix. So we started Genie back in 2020. My wife was a full-time reseller. Now she's a very part-time reseller. And I was working in corporate accounting. And her first tax season was just kind of terrible.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and just jump in with that. It was a nightmare, to say the least. I feel like it was like 3 months of headaches and tears. There was actual crying involved. And so much of the reason for that was because I didn't even know where to start, when it came to like trying to figure out what information I even needed to gather, what I needed to be tracking, all of that. And then, of course, I just felt so far behind because once I did figure that out, then I realized, oh my goodness, I have to play catch up and stuff. So I was so thankful that my husband was in accounting during that time. And so he came home one day, he saw how miserable I was, and he was like, oh my goodness, I need to help this girl. So very thankful for that. He created a very basic Excel spreadsheet for me to help me track all of my information. And that was kind of like, I guess the very first step into all this. So fast forward a couple years after that, and COVID hit. And at that time, reselling had been going really well for me. I was just loving it. I was using the system that he created for me to track everything. But meanwhile, I was also, engaging in a lot of Facebook groups, Instagram groups, and just hearing from other resellers that they all were struggling with their numbers too. And I realized that it wasn't just me, I wasn't alone in this. Like, everybody kind of had the same story of, I don't know what to do. And they were terrified too. So, I'm sorry, just get this real quick. Take over for a second.
And can I ask, what kind of reselling, just to give people context, like what were you reselling and what platforms were you using?
Yeah, great question. So I was doing mostly clothing, and then since then I've kind of switched more so to shoes. So I started on Poshmark, then I also added eBay, Mercari, Depop, a couple things on Grailed. So kind of gone all over the place.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
sorry, so come back. So you were on a lot of Facebook groups and hearing a lot of other people struggling.
Yeah.
with this.
Yes. And so, Paul was still working in accounting during COVID. Thankfully, he didn't lose his job, but his hours did get reduced. And so that freed up some time. And he was like, I think I need to look for some other work. That didn't go very well. COVID was just so hard for so many people. And I just kept hearing, though, the same message, from these other resellers in these groups. And I will never forget, we were in our kitchen in our home in Baltimore, and I looked at Paul and I was like, babe, I think you could maybe take, the spreadsheet that you made for me, and we could, just add some more stuff to it, make it better, and just offer it to the reselling community because there seems like there's a real need there. And I wasn't expecting him to say yes or to even be interested in that because he's a very cautious, he thinks through things very, very deeply and carefully. And I'm just kind of like, woo, let's do this. So, but he really thought that would be good. And so I'm kind of rambling here, but long story short, he spent, I want to say 3 months, like that whole summer. Would you say that? Coding and VBA? Yeah.
It wasn't the whole summer. It's still doing
right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So several months coding a gorgeous Excel spreadsheet in VBA. It didn't even feel like a spreadsheet because he actually created buttons that you could push for everything. And so it was very, very, very user friendly. And we got plugged in with an influencer in the community. We were able to sell 500 copies of that. And it was going well, but we soon came to realize after that people don't like Microsoft Excel usually. So that's when we decided, hey, if we really want to help people, we need to launch a web application, just to make it even more user friendly. So that was 3 years ago now. I'm losing track of everything. So
it's over 4.
Okay. So yes,
2020.
Yes, that's right. Okay. Yeah. So we spent about a year in development for the web app and then launched that. And things have just been growing and growing really, really well since then. So.
Oh man. Okay. That's great because this is what I love is you've seen a need in the community and like stepping into it, even though I remember when I first started, my husband is an engineer, but he is very into the sheets and doing spreadsheet stuff. And he created this really complicated spreadsheet. And I kind of said the same thing of like, we should sell this. And he was like, absolutely not. I can barely handle you doing the spreadsheet and answering all your questions. Like, I can't handle, putting this on the market.
Yes, yes.
So,
Very familiar over here too. Almost exactly the same thing.
Really? Wow. Wow. Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of us have had this idea because again, there's such a need and, we feel for all of our reseller friends once we finally get our act together, but you see that there's other resellers who are still struggling and you're like, oh my gosh, I really want to help.
yes. Okay, so oh man, we have so much we want to cover and we have so many questions, but I want to actually go back to where you said when you first started tracking that very basic Excel spreadsheet, because I think we have a lot of people that are really overwhelmed with all the things that they feel they need to track. So what did that basic spreadsheet look like for someone? We have a group of people that have been doing this for a while and they're like, oh shoot, like I have not been doing this right.
Yeah.
Going back and fixing it is another problem. And then we have other people who are just starting, they want to do it right from the beginning. So what would you say that those people, those sellers should look at when they're tracking finances?
Yeah. So what we tell people is there's kind of three basic categories that you want to cover. So one is inventory, two is sales and refunds, and then three is expenses. So if you have those three things covered, that's really what you need to file your taxes and to give you a pretty good insight into what's going on in your business.
Okay.
So don't we just love it when there's concise answers like that? Because I think it's so easy to overcomplicate things. And three things, guys: inventory, sales and refunds, and expenses. And yeah, there's usually a lot in each of those categories, but it's not that much more complicated than that. So
No, yeah. And at that time, were you tracking, before you created this web app that I know does it all? And how we're going to go through this, you guys, just so you know, is we're going to talk about the bookkeeping and accounting and then kind of how my Reseller Genie ties it all together. And for a lot of you guys, Genie may be exactly what you're looking for. Other of you may realize like, okay, the spreadsheet's cutting it for me, but it's really just making sure that everyone has a really good understanding of how all the things work together, because that was the hardest thing for me, was realizing you have the inventory part and you have the bookkeeping part and they overlap. They talk to each other, but it is two separate tracking methods. So were you tracking your inventory, like the actual pieces that you bought, separately from your books when you first started?
It was all integrated. So I mean, like, depending on how you're going to account for your inventory, which I think we'll get into later, like cash versus accrual inventory method. But if you are tracking using the accrual inventory method, you need to have your inventory integrated with your books, because it's part of your finances. It'll be part of your expense reporting and all that good stuff.
Cool. Okay, let's go ahead and define that. All right, because I feel like that's a basic term, the cash versus accrual, that I see people talking about. If you guys know what cash versus accrual is, give yourself like give me an emoji in the comments that's like thumbs up. And if you're not, tell me how, give me an emoji that shows me you don't. Because I have talked about this so many times and I'm still quite confused. So can you define those two for us?
Yeah. So before I get into inventory, I want to take a step back because I feel like people actually get hung up when they're looking at their tax returns, because there's a box that asks, are you using cash or accrual inventory? Or not inventory, just cash or accrual method. So big picture for your business, accrual means that you recognize revenue. So like you get income when it's earned, and you recognize expenses, so you deduct expenses when they're consumed. So translating that into like real world, if say you got paid $1,000 for something that you're going to deliver over the next year, If you're using the accrual method, what you'd do is you'd split the $1,000 up into 12 payments effectively, and then every month you get the revenue from that. And same with expenses. If you bought like an annual subscription, you'd only count 1/12 of that every month.
Very complicated.
Sorry, my face.
Whereas
Okay.
with the cash method, you just record revenue whenever you get the money, and you record expenses whenever it goes out of your account. So
That's what I'm doing.
you'd say, all right, I got $1,000 in January. That's $1,000 of income. I paid $500 in February. That's $500 of expense.
Can you give an example? Let's say that I go to Goodwill and I get.
Well, that's another thing. Accrual method overall, I don't think any reseller ever does it. So,
okay.
I mean, most small businesses, not even just resellers, are cash method for their business as a whole. Now, where it gets a little bit fuzzy is how you account for inventory, because you can use the cash method overall for your business, but then just for inventory, you use accrual. Well, this is the reality. So so accrual inventory method means you record the expense when you sell the inventory. Cash inventory method means you record an expense when you buy it.
Okay.
Okay.
So overall, is there any reason why resellers like us, especially in the antique and vintage, is there any reason we should consider accrual? Like, is cash kind of, I know there's tax reasons, and what I've seen when I first started looking into is that there are some tax benefits to using the accrual method, because if you spend a lot one year and not, it kind of messes with your taxes. But so I'm just curious, and can you switch back and forth, or is it sort of like when you start your books, you need to choose one and stick with it?
Yeah, great questions. So simplifying the two methods, the advantage of the accrual method is that it's more accurate. The advantage of the cash inventory method is that it's faster. You mentioned tax advantages. So like with the accrual method, where that might come in is, say your first year, you go out and buy a bunch of inventory, but you don't sell that much. If you wrote off all that inventory, maybe you sold $5,000, but you bought $10,000 of inventory. So you lost $5,000 the first year. Sorry, I'm getting too much into the numbers here.
No, this is helpful, because my brain is already thinking you only have to turn a profit every 3 years in order for the IRS to recognize your business as a business, right? So depending how you want to not tweak, you're not like fixing the books, but how you're viewing your profit versus expenses.
Yeah, so like if you bought a bunch of inventory one year and you didn't sell enough to cover those expenses, then your income that year would be $0, but you may have actually lost thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
But since you're not like a corporation, you can't carry those losses over into the following year, so you never get the benefit of all the money that you paid on those inventory items.
If you're cash only.
Right.
Okay. So really the basic thing is also like you choose one and then you have to kind of stick with that, right? Because I think we went to, like, my husband does my bookkeeping and we just stuck with the cash basis because it was so much easier.
Yeah.
So you're just going to choose one. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, is it possible to change methods? Yes, but it's going to involve a fair amount of work, and you're going to have to, basically explain like why things are changing to the IRS, and that scares a lot of people. Understandably, I mean, any interactions with the IRS are a little bit scary, but it is possible to change. So it's not like it's set in stone, impossible to ever, come back, but it's going to require a good amount of effort.
Okay.
Yeah, because I think you would have to separate then, like, what was the like what inventory that I have left over that I didn't sell yet was with the cash method. And then the new inventory that I'm going to do accrual would need to be tracked separately so that there's no like intertwining. And then that
Exactly.
just seems really
Yeah.
complicated.
Yeah. I mean, the big thing is the IRS wants to make sure you're not doubling up on your expenses, right? Because, that's
Mm-hmm.
cheating. That's cheating. You can't do that.
Okay.
I will say that I started out like from the very beginning doing the accrual inventory method. And that is a little bit more I don't even want to say complicated, a little bit more time consuming, because you're tracking each piece of inventory versus like a bulk amount or whatever. But like Paul said, you can get excellent analytics doing it that way, and really figure out how much profit you're making and all that. But either method, cash or accrual, resellers do both. And what we generally say is if you're not sure which one to do, talk to your accountant or your CPA. If you guys need a recommendation for one, we're not at all affiliated with her, but we have one in our link tree, Courtney, and she helps resellers all the time with their books and accounting and taxes, and she even helps people get into my Reseller Genie and all that stuff. So I'll just put that out there. But yeah, she's fantastic. And sorry, just a really quick rabbit trail from that too is, there's unfortunately a lot of accountants and CPAs out there who don't really understand how resellers need to track their numbers and stuff. So finding one who actually is familiar with what we do can be really helpful. So yeah, anyway, if you know of somebody, definitely talk to them.
That's really good.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's step back just a little bit because one of the questions that we wanted to ask were when people are starting out. So cash and accrual is probably something that a lot of our new sellers are like, what? I never even heard about this. So they might be feeling a little overwhelmed because we threw them into the deep end. So let's step back. What are some of like the biggest mistakes or things that new sellers overlook when they start trying to book to account for their business?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the biggest one is just not doing it.
Yeah.
I think for a lot of folks, if you come into the reselling business and you haven't, run a business before, accounting can seem really scary. And so, you just push it off. I'll figure it out later. It's always worse when you wait until the end of the year to do the work for the entire year.
Don't be like me.
No, yeah.
So, I mean, I think that's the biggest one. Another one is not getting a separate payment method for your business expenses. Um, and on that note, so like a lot of people will say getting a business bank account, which is good advice, but I feel like it holds some people back because depending on where you are, you need certain things set up with your state to get a business bank account. Really, you just need a separate bank account. So if you don't have an LLC or whatever your state requires to open a bank account there, just open a separate personal account and only use it for your business.
Yeah.
That makes your bookkeeping so much easier because you're not going through your groceries and your bills and everything and then trying to find the business expenses in there. It's all in one place.
Yeah. That and that's what I did at the very beginning was just my own checking account in my own name. Get it. I don't know. How do you guys feel about business credit cards? I'm like a big really into the credit card points game. So
I love those too.
what?
I just said I love those too. Those points, man, those are fantastic.
Yeah.
Already free money. Why not?
Oh, yes. Yes. Okay. So everything's separate. No, I think that's really good because I've heard, and this is a thing that I've seen some comments that I've heard from people about using software versus accounting for yourself is they're so afraid the software is going to miss things. But then the onus is on them and I know you have to reconcile, and we can talk about that later as well, but then the onus is on you. Like you have to enter all your expenses, all of your everything, like yourself, and keep that up to date. And if you get behind, then it's just so much work to do that. So okay, there are So I guess the next thing I wanted to ask was, first off, we didn't clarify, like, what is the difference between a CPA and an accountant?
Yeah, good question. So a CPA, it stands for Certified Public Accountant, and it's a credential that some accountants get. So
Mm-hmm.
different states will have different requirements, like number of college credits. Some states require you to have a major in accounting. But no matter what state you're in, there's an exam you have to take. And it basically just really drills you on various aspects of accounting. So an accountant is just someone who practices accounting in some variety. So you have corporate accountants, you have tax accountants, you have forensic accountants. There's all sorts of accountants out there. CPA is just a credential that an accountant can get.
Okay. And you are an accountant and thankfully focused on serving resellers and all of that. That was one thing we had talked about, because I think I had said CPA and then we just wanted to clarify, like,
Sure.
Right.
you know.
Right. Yeah, I'm not a CPA, but I was a corporate accountant, and so that makes
Yeah.
me familiar with how accounting systems work, basically.
So one of the questions, we actually got this from several people, is especially with like increasing costs of paying accountants or bookkeepers, which, you know, are also different. How do you know if we're resellers / antique dealers, how do we know when it's okay to do our own bookkeeping and accounting / taxes? That's two separate things. And when do we need to actually hire someone to do it for us?
Yeah. That's an awesome question. And I think that kind of ties into another like common mistake for new business owners. So, I mean, the big thing is like you're going to have to learn a little bit of accounting if you want to do your own books. There's no getting around it. It's a skill set. People do it for a living. So it's not just something that you inherently know. There's some skills you need to develop. So I would say if you're not willing to learn, then you need to hire a bookkeeper. Or or if you get to a certain point where the time you're spending bookkeeping is costing your business money, so basically you could make more money with the time you're spending on bookkeeping than working on your business, you should be hiring a bookkeeper.
Oh, that's so good. I love how you phrase that. If the time spent on this task is actually costing you money instead of making money, that I feel like that applies to anything that we can hire out.
Yes.
As dealers, like thinking about the hours spent. And is this especially, I think the one thing that's so hard, especially for us solopreneurs, is that we are doing everything and there's a lot of activities that are not directly generating revenue. They're so important to the business. And this is one thing I often ask myself in life in general, and a lesson my children are also learning. Like, there are tasks that are important and I don't have to do it, but it does need to get done.
Yes.
Mommy doesn't need to do this, but it is important.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and so that's also a question I ask. There are certain things like buying inventory is, you make your money when you buy. That has to be done correctly. I need to do that, you know. But there are other things on the back end that if you're at a point where you can afford the basically, like, okay, it costs this much money. I don't even know how much. Do bookkeepers, like, is it a retainer fee? Is it, you know, per hour? Kind of vary?
Depends.
Yeah, it depends. I mean, I see like advertisements for bookkeeping services, and a lot of times they'll say X dollars per month. But if you aren't working with like a big corporate company that does a lot of bookkeeping, then you're frequently looking at like an hourly rate.
Okay. So basically, if you look at that hour and you're like, I could generate twice as much revenue working that hour myself versus paying someone, then right there you're saving yourself money.
Yes.
So
Yeah, for sure.
that's
And
a great.
it's even not just their hourly rate, but considering how long it would take you to do the same task. Because maybe in an hour they can do 5 times as much as you can do in an hour. You know,
Or 5 times less. It's important to know who you're hiring.
Yes.
Mhm.
Or
That's
do
true.
it, they'll do it in like 20 minutes versus an hour or two.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And they don't have all of that like clutter in their heads like regarding your business. So like when I'm inputting something, I'm like, oh, I didn't think about the mileage. Oh, I didn't think about this. Oh, I didn't think. And then like if it's just someone putting in like the receipts or whatever, like however they're tracking it, they're not thinking about all that other stuff. Unless it's just me, but I feel like it's spaghetti up there sometimes. And like everything is touching everything else, and then I get like so discombobulated. So
Yeah.
like if you're paying someone who's completely separate from you, they might be able to input that information or do that task faster than you because they don't have all that background on your
Yeah, I think
business.
probably be more efficient and focused because yeah, I'm similar to you, Nicole, in that I get caught up in all the details, and the details are very important, right? So like, we need to be tracking all those things, but sometimes, somebody can be more efficient with the task, and then you later on go in and say, hey, make sure that you add the mileage and the expenses, all that. That's really good.
And I think it's also important to have someone who is objective and not directly impacted by your business to run numbers for you, because they're less emotional and they can look at things and be more factual, which kind of leads me to another question that we had is, once you have, right, we're not just recording numbers we are recording numbers for the government to check boxes so that we have those numbers at the end, but it's so much more. Accounting and bookkeeping is so much more than checking off the box for taxes by the end of the year. We really want to use those numbers to actually understand the health of our business and inform our decisions. So when we're looking, like, can you run us through what are some of the financial statements? Like when I log in and I see there's profit and loss and there's this and that, these statements, how do we take those reports and actually use them to inform our business decisions?
Yeah. Great question.
Great questions. Yeah.
So I really want to key in on the profit and loss statement, because I think that this is something which any small business owner can really use and implement. So profit and loss statement, if you're not familiar, summarizes all of your income and all of your expenses in one place. So um, it's great for getting a bird's eye view of your business. And you said it, so you run the report for a certain period of time. So you could do it for a year, you could do it for a quarter, for a month. And the way a profit and loss statement is constructed is you have a income section, then you have a cost of goods section. Now I want to talk about this real quick. Because resellers deal with inventory so much, we think that it's only the inventory that would go under that section, but it's taxes versus accounting reporting is a little different. So cost of goods is any expense that is directly related to your sales process. So you're
Say that any expense that is related to the sales process. Okay,
yeah.
what does that mean?
So for example, you buy shipping supplies so that you can ship your sale out, right? Now on your tax return, you're not putting that under cost of goods sold. It would go under like supplies. But in your accounting system, that's a cost of goods sold. The reason why it's important to have your expenses categorized that way is because your income minus cost of goods sold, that's your gross profit, that gives you a sense for how efficiently you're running your business at just kind of the thing your business does. So how efficient is your sales process? I'm buying this, these items. I have to, pay this much to sell them. Here was the revenue. So I made this much from just the sales process. Now, underneath that, you have all your other business costs. So like software maybe that you use for accounting, for example, or just general office supplies, things that aren't really related to your sales process. So then at the bottom, you would take your gross profit, subtract all your other business expenses, and you get your net profit. It's helpful to have it separated that way, because if maybe you're not making as much as you want to, that can break it up and see, okay, do I need to work on my efficiency with my sales process or the rest of my business?
Okay. And just to clarify, cost of goods sold doesn't mean, like if I'm looking at a month, it doesn't mean only the inventory that I sold that month if I'm on a cash basis. This is where I get a little lost in the weeds. Like if I'm looking at cost of COGS, that's how I, COGS, if I'm looking at that, that is all the inventory I bought for that time period. When you're like, what exactly does that term mean when you're looking at that? Does that make sense? That question?
Yeah. So, I mean, just stepping back again, there's a difference between what goes on your tax return and how you report it on your profit and loss statement.
Mm-hmm.
Now, since you're using the cash inventory method, you're writing off your inventory as soon as you buy it.
Mm-hmm.
So your inventory purchases for the whole month would be part of your cost of goods sold
Okay.
on your profit and loss statement.
All right. That's how I'm doing it. Now, and if you're accrual, then is it different?
It's different. Yeah, great question. It would only be the cost of the items that you sold for that month.
Okay. All right. And then,
Is that
yeah, I
make
love.
sense, Whitney?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Listen, guys. Okay, I know you know Mark too.
Yes.
Yeah,
Not your dad's CPA. I'm taking his bookkeeping course right now.
awesome.
I probably,
He's fantastic.
oh my God, I probably watched the first video like 5 times.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I think it's a mental, like I think of myself as being very highly intelligent, but it's all, I must have some childhood trauma with math or something in my background, because sometimes these words flip up on the screen and my brain just goes la 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 la, like
You are not alone with that. I totally get it. I totally get it. And I'll just say too, yeah, just for everybody who's listening now and who's going to be listening in the future, this stuff, I get it because I'm one of you, and I'm more, I'm business oriented, but I don't like naturally have the accounting piece, right? He does have the accounting piece, and I don't, I'm still working on understanding it, but that's why it's so important to have a system that works for you in place.
yes.
Because while it's important to learn all these terms and stuff, if you have a good system that you know is going to help you track everything and stay accountable to track everything, it's going to make your life a whole lot easier. And even if you can't remember the definitions to stuff, just so long as you're entering in everything that you're supposed to be entering in, it's going to spit out the reports that you need. So I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, and I mean, following on that also, it's not just like some people are born understanding this stuff. It's a learned skill.
Yes.
Like I spent plenty of hours just with my brain in knots when I was learning how to be an accountant.
Mhm.
So it's it's not because if you're someone who's like, man, I just don't get this stuff, it's not because you're stupid or because you can't get it.
Nope.
It's a skill set, it's a learning process. Some people might learn it faster than others, but it's very doable.
Yeah.
It's very doable.
Yes. And there's some people that actually enjoy doing it. I'm like, I don't understand you at all, but I'm so happy for you. I love that for you. So
Stop me off and leave me there.
yeah. Okay. All right. I think, okay. We're just going to dive into all the questions. We got so many questions. And I think that as we walk through all of these questions, we will be able to fill in a lot of the gaps. So we have questions from last week. We also have questions people are submitting now. You guys can use the question box. So someone asked the best resources for staying, or okay, actually before we do that, I'm going to rewind. Sorry, we're going to rewind. Tell us, now that we've kind of had an idea of what you need to do with accounting, I would love to hear about your software. Do you call it SAS, like software service? Not that that really matters. I just like fancy terms. But tell us how my Reseller Genie kind of ties in all these pieces. I have clients that use Genie and they love it. And because I am on Shopify and I started using Wave Bookkeeping a long time ago, I use those too, but it's 2 separate programs that are doing the same thing. So I'd love to hear how your software integrates those, and how people can integrate that into their business.
Yeah, for sure.
I'll answer the first part just about like, what exactly is my Reseller Genie? So in a nutshell, it is an online, not platform, but you just log in anywhere that you have internet, to my Reseller Genie into your account. And you can track all of your inventory, all of your sales, and your expenses across any and all selling platforms. So simply put, that's it. It's just think of it as like a big hub where all of your business numbers can go into. Now, there's a whole lot more that it can do. We have some of the best analytics on the market, because we were talking about profit and loss statement earlier, right? Which is a report with all these numbers. If you're more visual like me, if you look at a report and you're like, oh, this is overwhelming, we have graphs and beautiful charts with colors and everything, that's actually going to just show you all of those numbers. So again, that might just be a little bit easier, for some folks to track and stuff. So yeah, our analytics are fantastic. And then we have the reseller reports that you need to help you file your taxes come tax season, which we are in right now. God help us all. But yeah, the short and simple is you can track all of your inventory, sales, and expenses across any and all selling platforms. We have integrations, and if you're not sure what an integration is, just think automation. We have automation on our ultimate plan, which is the $20 a month plan, with eBay, Poshmark, and Mercari. We also have bank integration. So we were talking about expenses earlier, right? So you can actually link your bank account to my Reseller Genie. So Genie will actually pull in all of your business expenses daily, which can be very, very helpful.
Yes.
Save you a whole lot of time with that. And then, I mentioned that we have, the integrations for eBay, Mercari, and Poshmark, but you can still track all of your sales and data from all other selling platforms. You can either upload them, like with an Excel spreadsheet. If you have everything listed there, you can enter them manually. Yeah, we've just tried to make it as simple and seamless as possible. And we are currently working on adding more integrations. So we know that automation is key because time is money. I think I saw somebody say that in the chat, time is money. And so, yeah, we understand that that's really, really important for a reseller. So that's like big picture what our software can do. Just think it's the hub to track all of your numbers. And it was created by a reseller and an accountant. So we understand what you guys need.
Yes. Yes, I love it. And I just think, especially we have so many sellers. Sorry guys, I'm checking. I don't know why this is not working as far as I'm trying to get my robot Whitney to work and it's not. Okay, we're just gonna save that and see if it works. If you guys haven't not gotten a DM from me, then we'll try again. But we have so many sellers that they primarily are on Instagram, like selling Instagram lives and sales and that kind of thing. And they don't have a great system set up for that where that integrates both of them. So that's what I really like about it is if you don't have a website, or I even have a client that uses it for her booth inventory also, because then she has a booth and she sells online as well. And then she can kind of do both, manage all of that inventory together. Because if you are, like I mentioned, I'm on Shopify and Shopify has tons of reports and it gives me gross reports, but it doesn't have the breakdown of actual, obviously it doesn't have any of my expenses or anything.
Sure.
Corey said she liked Genie better. She had tried a different inventory platform. Her question is, does my Reseller Genie have plans to add an option for pictures to inventory items?
That's a great question.
Yeah, it's a good question. So we listen to what people ask and we try and build around that. So you're not the first person to ask about associating a picture with inventory.
And we have it on our list. We have a list of all of the requests from customers.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, so it is on our list to add. Long story short.
Yeah, that would take up a lot of that's a lot of hardware. I don't know what to call it. I just know storage.
Storage, yeah.
Potentially,
Storage.
like one way we could do it is linking. Sorry,
excited about. It's okay. You don't need to.
We could just link a URL from like an eBay listing.
Oh, yeah,
We don't even necessarily have to store the image on Genie.
Yeah.
There you go.
It's just troubleshooting on how we're going to do this. So.
Yeah. Okay,
I have
guys.
a note with the photos because my husband made me like a Microsoft Access file where I had like a page for every item that I when I first started out, I had the picture, I had the information, I had the description, like all that.
Yeah.
It's a lot of tracking to add photos to. So like just a note, it's just if you want to do it and maybe you don't like buy in bulk when you're reselling and you buy specific pieces, then it might be helpful. But adding photos is just another layer of like things you have to add to like your checklist when you're working on bookkeeping.
I agree with you, Nicole. And, you know, I think you make a good point. For some people, it'll make sense. For other people, not so much. So, yeah.
Okay. I do have an affiliate link, and it's for 15% off. We didn't even ask, how much is it per month?
Yeah. So, 3 different plans right now. It starts from $9.99 a month to $19.99 a month. You can cancel anytime, and 14-day money back guarantee as well. So, yeah, I will say that the $19.99 a month, the $20 a month, that's going to have the most automation. So if you want to save the most time, we recommend that plan. But if you're just starting out and you're maybe selling 3 items a month or something like that, just start with the basic plan because, yeah, that'll be good for you.
And I always tell people to like assume you're going to grow a lot, because another problem I see resellers doing is that they don't think big and they don't plan for growth. So they kind of and I kind of did this at the beginning too. We patched together systems that maybe work when you have very small inventory and very low sales volume. And you're like, well, this is okay for now, and I'm afraid to invest money in a bigger system because I don't need it. But 6 months later, your business grows a ton and you're playing catch up. And I've experienced that too as well, where I've had some mistakes I made 3 years ago and it came back to bite me. And it's like, okay, now I have the systems in place to deal with that volume.
Yeah.
But it is really, really hard to like fix things and to transition between systems when your business is really big. So think big, guys. Just plan for growth. So see, that's great. So what I was saying was I do have, and I'm sorry guys, it's not working, and it might be because sometimes with mini chat, if you have already used Robot Whitney once, she gets really, unhappy and she doesn't want to send another link. But if you guys use Thrifty Whitney on the website Thrifty Whitney, it gives you 15% off your first month. So you can try it out and see if it works. Okay, we're going to dive into these questions. So let's pop up. We're going to go back and forth. I like this one. Actually, it's not a question, but someone did say, this one is going to be good. just had to pop that up. Okay. So, okay. This was a really good one. Paying cash without receipts, because and then also piggyback on that. Do we really have to keep our receipts? Should we be organizing them? Is it okay if we just collect them and shove them in a drawer and ignore them year after year? Asking for a friend.
Great questions.
Yeah. Okay. So let's start with garage sales. They don't give you receipts at garage sales. And if you ever had to like justify an expense and you told the auditor, I bought this at a garage sale, they're going to understand garage sales don't give receipts. So, I mean, if you're claiming some ridiculous amount for an item that's clearly not worth, what you're claiming, then that's probably going to raise eyebrows and, might be disallowed. But if it makes sense how much you're saying you paid for it, it's okay not to have a receipt for a garage sale purchase. Now, as far as having receipts in general, kind of a rule of thumb is if it's above $75, you really do want those receipts. And
why $75? Is that just the number the government made up?
It's an IRS,
They threw up.
Yeah, they just threw it
I
out
feel
there.
like that's well over what we.
Yeah,
Well,
I mean, for reselling
me at
businesses,
least, that's a big purchase for resale.
But are you saying that collectively, if $75, like a whole bunch of items on one shopping trip, or for one item?
for an expense. So, I mean, we're talking sourcing right now, but also like if you paid for an annual subscription,
Right.
It was $200 or something like that.
Right, but if I go to the thrift store and I buy 20 items, and that's $75 total.
Yeah, I would keep that. If you get a receipt, I'd say it's worth keeping
Yeah.
because that just supports, what you're claiming is your business expense. Now, as far as your level of organization, can you put it in a shoebox? I mean, you could. Um, I would at least do your shoe boxes by year
Yes,
because
I do.
I mean, like the way a typical audit works is they're going to look at your books and they're going to pick out certain transactions and say, justify this. And so if you had a $200 expense, then a real easy way to justify it is you pull out the receipt for $200, you hand it to them. You can also do digital copies. So if you don't want a shoebox, you just want to like scan it to a iCloud or Google Drive.
Mhm.
That's another great option.
Do you have
Um,
that with my Reseller Genie? Can you attach receipt images?
Great question. We don't have that currently.
Okay, not yet.
Surprisingly, we don't have a lot of people ask us for that feature, which I thought we were going to have more people asking us for it all the time.
Mhm.
But so far we haven't.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think once we get a mobile app, that'll be kind of a no-brainer. But to a certain extent, I could see the experience of just saving it to iCloud being easier than, getting it onto your computer and associating.
Mhm.
Yeah. But what I've done in the past is either keep all my receipts for 1 year together, right? And then more recently, I've just started like what he said, just taking digital copies. So I'll just use the camera in my iPhone, take a picture of the receipt, and then I make a folder in my phone for that year of receipts. So yeah, it's really up to you on if you want to store the paper ones or the digital ones. Just make sure that you're not deleting them.
Okay. So keep your receipts, keep them somewhat organized. And then, I mean, and you can always make your own. If you're at a flea market or somewhere and you're buying a chest of drawers for $100, I mean, you could just have your own receipts or paper and have the vendor sign it or something. I mean, I don't think it needs to be super official looking, right?
Yeah.
If you wanted to do things, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, because there's no receipts associated with the transactions, um, the scrutiny of those receipts is not going to be
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
crazy.
Okay.
I think like so then a concern would be if you go to like an estate sale or even like a flea market, like a huge flea market. So I've been to Brimfield, Massachusetts like a handful of times, and usually they don't give you receipts, and most of the time it's cash only.
Yeah.
So I don't have like that digital like footprint of like my credit card being processed. So like if I'm spending say $1,000 all week on inventory, but I don't have any receipts for that, is that a problem? Because I
And
don't
if
know
you're,
how to handle it.
I know, and if you're like
So,
me, I just, this is probably really bad, but like I went to the ATM and I pulled out cash for this weekend, and it'll have $100, and I'm just gonna put inventory. I'm real.
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I mean, if you're spending it on inventory and you have the inventory, there's not a paper trail for this sort of stuff. So I mean,
Yeah.
really the only question is like for record keeping, what's the best process for you? So
Mhm.
I mean, some folks like to bring a notebook to keep track of their purchases at garage sales or at flea markets. That's great. You could also do it on your phone. You could do it straight into your accounting application. But since these transactions don't have receipts, you're not going to be expected to have a receipt for it.
Okay. So is there also a way in my Reseller Genie, is there like a cash? I know some bookkeeping things have like cash on hand or something. So so instead of it being an actual debit or deduction from my checking account, it actually is a transfer into my cash on hand, and then I can account for like $50 cash spent on this item.
Right. Yeah. Good question. So we don't have that level of sophistication currently. Um, that would be more in line with like a full, QuickBooks type accounting solution.
Yeah.
What we found is for most resellers, that that level of accounting detail is not, something that they can really make use of.
It's a little beyond. Yeah. I mean, I'm asking these questions, but I'm not actually going to do it probably. I think, I mean, I
No,
have
they're
that.
great questions.
They really are.
Like, we're just being really honest, guys.
Yes.
We're just being honest.
Good.
All right, Nicole, will you pull a question from our there's too many questions here. I'm getting overwhelmed. Will you pull a question from our list on the document?
Oh boy. Okay. What is the deal with quarterly taxes? Please help because they scare me, was one of the questions.
And that may also have been about remitting sales tax, which we haven't even touched on. But yeah, sorry, just context.
Sure. So quarterly taxes is it's a type of income tax payment. So if you work at a job, every paycheck you'll see the government takes a ton of money from your paycheck, and then you just never see it again. With being self-employed, you get to have all that money come into your account, and then you have to send it out. So it's more painful. So that's all quarterly taxes are, is you're making payments to your state government and the federal government that normally it would be withheld.
Income tax, sorry. And this is income tax we're talking about, right?
Correct.
/ Social Security, or is it just?
Yep.
Okay.
Social Security is covered by that too, which as a self-employed person, you're paying double because you get to pay both sides of it. Now, your first year in business, I don't think there's any penalties associated with not paying quarterly income tax payments. But following that, you're expected to every quarter pay what you would owe in income tax. Usually, if you file your taxes, either your accountant will give you estimates for what you'll pay, or like if you're using TurboTax, they'll give you that as well, so you don't have to do calculations. But yeah, does that? I think that answers the question.
Yeah, I think we actually got dinged for this last year, so it would have been 2023 taxes.
Yeah.
Where the government or maybe the state came back and was like, you're not paying quarterly taxes. And my husband does our taxes. And of course, because I know nothing, I'm always just like, he's like, we're not going to hire an accountant. I'm like, good. That means you get to do it all. You are my accountant. And then, yeah, he had to set up quarterly payments.
Yeah.
And then the other thing then, which we didn't even touch on, collecting and remitting sales tax, or filing for a retail sales tax license. Is that something you have done for your business? I think that might be more common for antique dealers because we are often buying from antique stores or from other dealers. So I'll just say every state, most of the states have the same law where if I sell to someone with a Kansas address, then I have to collect sales tax on that item. So I have my retail sales tax license. I've had it since 2021 because I was shopping at an antique store and I told them I'm a dealer and they're like, okay, where's your sales tax license? And I was like, I don't have one. Well, you need to have one. It's kind of like this. I've even had a dealer tell me, like, I don't take anyone seriously who says they're a dealer if they don't have a retail sales tax license. I'm like, okay. But basically that means when I purchase something from a shop, and even at a thrift, I've even had a local thrift store that it has accepted my retail sales tax license. I do not pay sales tax on that item. And if I sell that item to a Kansas resident, I collect sales tax. In Shopify, because I run everything through Shopify, it calculates what the sales tax is because it is different based on your tax jurisdiction. So basically the county you live in, the city you live in, etc. So then when I first set it up, you have to tell the state, how much sales tax you think you're going to collect. I think for last 2024, I only sent in like $500. Once you cross certain thresholds, you have to file monthly or quarterly. And some states require you to file monthly. Even if you don't make any local sales in that month, you still have to file it as zero. So that's just something you have to check with your state. And again, if you're not using, does Genie record like sales tax like that?
Yeah, so for our integrations, we do pull in sales tax and the sales state as well. Now, for most folks, Poshmark, eBay, Mercari, those are all collecting and remitting sales tax on your behalf.
Mm-hmm.
There are some states that require you, even if you're not the one who's remitting the sales tax, to report on here were my sales in,
Mm-hmm.
in this state. I think Florida is one of them, maybe Texas. So like any of your Texas sales you would report, but then you'd say, and it was paid by eBay or
Yeah.
I don't think you specify eBay, you just say someone else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's just one of those small things that saves you a ton of money over the long run because you're not paying sales tax. That's going to save you 10% basically. And so what I did before I was on Shopify is that I just created a separate spreadsheet and I would enter the tax code. You have to record like the sale amount, the shipping amount, the total purchase amount, what city it went to. And then I upload that as a spreadsheet to the Department of Revenue, or enter it manually if I get overwhelmed with all the spreadsheets. And then you just send that money in. So the other thing you have to remember is kind of you have to have that money set aside for that, which actually goes, okay, this is one of my favorite questions. We had a couple of questions that people asking how much money, basically, what do I do with my money? How much should I be saving for the business? How much can I pay myself? This is more like budgeting of what is a good amount, because I either hear people who pull out too much money from the business or other people that are afraid to pay themselves too much. What kind of percentages do you think are good?
Yeah, let me just really quick. I'll kind of answer the first part of that. So as far as how much to set aside for taxes, because a lot of us don't think about that until we get our tax bill and we're like, oh shoot, I wasn't setting that aside, I wasn't saving that. It can vary by state, but we recommend like asking your CPA or your accountant. But in my Reseller Genie specifically, there's a place where you can actually put in a percentage of what you want to not set it, like we won't set it aside for you, but of what your income tax rate is. So it's like a calculator that's going to calculate that percentage off of each sale that you make. And I love that feature personally because it even shows up in a colorful graph too. So I actually can see every time I log into my Genie, okay, I see all this money in my bank account, but really this 30%, I shouldn't even be touching it because I need to be setting that aside for taxes. So it's usually 25-30% that they recommend to set aside for income tax, but it can really vary. So don't quote us on that. Talk to your accountant about it. But I did just want to throw that out there, that is a feature in Genie, and we're going to talk about the other budgeting things.
Yeah. So I mean, I think kind of one of the main drivers for reselling businesses and your growth is going to be your inventory, right? Because you only make money when you sell inventory. So if you're using the accrual method where you're writing off inventory when you sell it, it's, I think, a little bit easier to figure out how much money you want to put back in the business. Because general rule of thumb is if you want to kind of maintain where you're at, you should probably be putting back into the business whatever the cost of your inventory sales were for the month. Because in theory, that should be replenishing the inventory that you sold.
Say that again. So how much? Sorry, say that again. How much should you be putting in the amount you made?
So the cost of what you sold.
Oh, the wholesale price, what I pay. So if I buy $500 worth of inventory and I sell it for $1,500, $500 should go back in the business.
Yeah. If you kind of want to just maintain where you're at right now, that's a general rule of thumb for, okay, yeah, you replenish what you sold, you should be able to continue doing about what you're doing that way.
Yeah.
Now, if you want to grow your revenue, then you want to probably put more into the business, get more inventory available. Now, as far as your calculating percentages go, that's going to be highly business dependent and goal dependent. And it could be that you need to take 80% of your profit, just to survive. That's what you need to do. And if that's the case, that's what you got to do. But maybe it's all right, for 3 months I can live on 50%. and I want to try and grow this business some more, then that's okay too. But just kind of general rule of thumb is, I would say, if you're wanting to just maintain, reinvest into inventory, however much the value was that you sold in inventory. If you want to grow, invest more.
That is the most helpful piece of advice, because that is the one question that I get asked the most by sellers about, is how much, like, how do I budget for inventory? And I never know exactly how to answer, because it is so variable, and like, especially depending on what you're buying, what you're selling, so just being able to look at last month I sold $500 wholesale worth of inventory, and that's really helpful. I will say also, I came across Profit First, which I'm sure you're familiar with. Kind of like one of those books that probably could have been a 5-page booklet. I don't know. It got really in the weeds. It was a lot. I think I read the first chapter. But what I took from it was the formula, because it's the same thing that what you're saying. His big emphasis, because someone said, how much should I save? And I think one of the best things I've done in my business, someone said that's a strategic question that an accountant CPA should be discussing with the reseller. Awesome. Yes. So that's a question. If you have an accountant, I think you mean the strategic question is as how much should I be spending on inventory? If you're not able to answer that question yourself, that is when bringing in an accountant or bookkeeper to help you answer that question can be really helpful, because they know how to interpret the numbers in a way that you can understand, or using a software, again, that gives you the reports and statements that you need to be able to understand that question. Anyway, so what I started doing after I kind of read that was, I have, my business checking account. Profit First says you should open 5 different checking accounts, one for operating expenses, one for taxes, it's like all of this, and it's a bit much for me. But what I took from it was that you need to be setting aside profit for a long-term capital investment in your business. So I kind of think of it as skimming the cream off the top. The general rule that they give is 5% of your profit, and that's net profit after, like what you're saying, after your inventory expenses, all your operating expenses, etc., and put that in a separate savings account. And I've been doing that. And it is wild how much that does build up over the months and over time. And also, I'm not actually that thrifty. I'm very spendy. If I see all that money in my checking account, I get overconfident, and I was like, oh, I can buy that. I can buy that. Oh, auction. Yeah, I'll pay 20% over what I should. I got the cash for it. And then I've gotten myself in trouble with that. And so what I found is skimming that off and putting it aside. Now it's like a nice little nest egg that I can invest in rebranding. I can invest in a trip to England. I have that set aside, and it's really important. And the thing that was really helpful for me was their guideline, and that's probably what you're saying, is maintaining that, is that for businesses that have less than $250,000 in, I can't remember if it's probably net revenue, then you basically pay yourself 50% of the profit. So that's what I've been using for myself. And it's actually really motivating, because it makes me check my spending and not overspend on items. Because honestly, I know that I have to get at least 3 times. If I buy something for $100, I need to be able to sell it for $300, because a third of that is going to go towards expenses, whether it's fees, shipping, booth rental, etc. A third of that is going to have to go back in the business, and a third is hopefully going to go to me, the way that it kind of breaks down. Someone said, I have worked on building the nest egg too, but wondering if there's tax implications if I have more saved versus withdrawing for my personal. And that actually connects with another question that we have that, hold on, where did it go? I think it's in this question box. Here, I'm going to pop that up too. The tax implications, paying yourself versus saving.
Yeah, so most reselling businesses are going to either be sole proprietorships or single member LLCs. So in those cases, paying yourself is not really a consideration, because whatever your business's profit, that's considered your income. Now, if you're a corporation, then your pay gets run through payroll, and that's kind of a larger topic, but most reselling businesses, probably 99%, don't ever get into the S corp or C corp territory. Um, okay, so the tax implication question. So kind of following from that, there's not additional taxes that would be levied on if you saved money versus spent it, because you're being taxed on whatever your business's profit was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that it's all the same in the government's eyes. Whether you, yeah, that makes sense. What is the threshold for an S corp? Is it like $60,000 net profit kind of when?
So there's not really a threshold for an S corp. It's so it's a decision that you'll probably make with your accountant. Frequently, one of the justifications for going to an S corp is when you have enough business profit that you can justify putting yourself on payroll
Mm-hmm.
for some of your business's profit, and then the rest of it you don't have to pay self-employment tax on. So it's more of a question of like, okay, do my numbers line up so I can save money on taxes, as opposed to my business is making X amount, so it needs to be an S corp.
Mm-hmm. That's like graduate level business for sure. I actually had a question. I thought this was really good, and that's maybe where a lot of our friends are, is what if you have been selling already for like a few years, but you haven't been doing all of these businessy things? How do you transition to being like official?
Yeah, so I mean, if there's income that hasn't been reported, the right way to go about doing it is going back and amending tax returns. Um, so I know that's not the answer people want to hear.
To hear that, but
That's
yeah.
that's the answer given.
Yeah.
And starting this year, February is not too late to just jump in and start, right? I mean, you just have to start doing it.
Yeah.
Start
Honestly, yeah, I think it was February when I started, like my first year of having to do this whole, figure out my taxes and stuff as a reseller. I think I actually started in February because my husband was like, I don't know, come December of, the previous year, he's like, babe, you got to start working on this. And I was like, okay. And I didn't. And then January, babe, you got to do this. I was like, okay, but I didn't. And I think it was February when I finally started. And so it was like February through April that I was like, ah. But again, that was because I didn't have a system in place. And so, guys, like once you have a system, if you have a spreadsheet that you love, my Reseller Genie is fantastic, but whatever that is, just start. And again, the biggest thing that I see that holds resellers back is just not starting. So I know it feels scary, and at first it's going to feel overwhelming. But once you get going, you're going to find a rhythm and stuff. And I cannot tell you, we haven't really talked about this, but I can't tell you how empowering it is. Once you get on top of your numbers, you're going to feel like, oh my goodness, for the first time in my life, I actually understand my business and I can actually make educated, good decisions. And that means that I can actually grow. So there's a lot of benefits, so many things. So yeah. Were you gonna say something?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
I'm reading our question. So when you say amend past tax returns, it's the personal tax return, right? You're actually going back and saying, forgot to, add in this miscellaneous income. That's all it is generally, is miscellaneous income if you're a sole prop. So yes, we give you the information and you get to decide what to do with it, guys. No judgment. Okay. And this kind of goes along with a question that someone else asked in the comment stream, because I think this is not just Venmo. I think it's PayPal. It's anyone. And they keep changing. The government likes to keep us on our toes. And yes, someone says this is not official CPA advice. We should have had that disclosure at the very beginning. We are not CPAs. We're not tax accountants. Talk to a professional. Anyway, so how much do you have to make on Venmo for the government to step in? So basically, what is the reporting threshold technically?
Well, so those are kind of two different questions. Reporting threshold to me, that sounds like a question about 1099Ks,
Mm-hmm.
which is a document that it's a tax document. Think of it almost like a W-2, but for your business. So the threshold, I just don't remember what the exact threshold is for 2024.
I think it's
No,
600.
no,
No?
it's not 600. So like that was the law, but then the past 2 years they amended it. I think it may have been 5,000 this past year, and then it's going to 2,500 this year, and then 600 the year after. But if you look it up, you'll see it. Basically, it's just you make a certain amount of money on a platform. They send a document to you that says, "Hey, you made this much money." They also send a copy to the IRS that says they made this much money. So that's what a 1099K is. So the reporting threshold is in flux right now, but it's going towards $600. Now, as far as like when you need to report it on your taxes, if it's income, so meaning like it's not personal items that you sold, you need to report it and pay taxes on it.
And and I feel like here's the problem. It's like what people need to know is if you're saying I'm just doing it on the side and everything's coming through Venmo, and then you get to the end of the year and realize, excuse my language, but crap, I had $7,000 of money coming in via Venmo. Venmo's telling the government that you haven't been tracking any of your expenses, any of your costs, nothing. The government's going to be like, that is $7,000 of pure profit because you're not showing me any of your expenses, and they're going to say you owe taxes on all of that.
Right.
Whereas if you're tracking, you can be like, no. I spent most of that at the antique store. And actually, I only have like $500 left. Obviously, then at that point, there's not a whole lot of profit. But that's why it's like people get into this and they think, oh, it's just a side hustle thing. And they have no idea how much they've made over the year. And it's like, it does come back to bite you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And I think for a lot of resellers, the way you get into it is you kind of fall backwards into it. Like you sell something personal on Poshmark or eBay, and you're like, that was super fun. And so then you sell everything else in your house that has value and you're not using. And then you're like, okay, I need to go and get more stuff to sell.
It's a gateway drug.
It's a gateway drug. Yeah, and so then you get 6 months into it, and you're like, oh shoot, this is a business now. Like I'm buying things and selling for a profit. So usually first tax season is kind of tough because people just aren't tracking that stuff. And I'm glad you mentioned like if you're not tracking your expenses, you're paying tax on the full amount. People will often get hung up with like, oh, the IRS expects me to track all my expenses. Honestly, they don't care if you don't report any expenses as long as you're paying taxes.
They
The
love it.
expenses is for your benefit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, people are like, wait, do I have to do or do I have to track expenses? And we're like, well, you don't have to, but you're going to pay more in taxes. So please don't do that.
Yeah, that's like the proof that like you're not just collecting all this money from people. Like you're saving your own behind by like tracking it so that you don't have to dish out all this money.
They might think you're dealing something else. I don't know. I mean, services. We'll just leave it at that, guys. Just show what you're doing to get that cash.
Hey, Whitney and Nicole, I did want to just mention one thing, just in case this is a helpful resource. We do have a blog. If you just type into Google or whatever, My Reseller Genie blog, we actually just released a blog post about the eBay 1099K, but it really applies to how any 1099K works. So if you're confused about like, okay, what is a 1099K? What are the numbers on that? How do I use that in filing my taxes? All that, it goes over all that information. And it's really, really well broken down. So just wanted to throw that out there. But if you just search My Reseller Genie blog, just scroll down. I think it was last month's post. Yeah, you'll see it really easily. So that might be helpful.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Okay. Nicole, what's another question from our doc?
Oh boy.
I'm going to look at these on the phone. Some of these I think we kind of already talked about.
It came up before when we were talking about the cost of goods sold. Would Paul, when you were saying like you could track your bookkeeping like subscription, or someone also mentioned, so then like would the booth rent or like any type of like rental for selling your goods, would that be included in your cost of goods sold, or would that be an expense?
Okay, great question. So yeah, just want to zoom back out in case someone's joining us a little bit later on. So what I was saying is there's a difference between cost of goods sold on your tax return versus on an accounting report. So on the profit and loss statement, cost of goods sold groups together any expense that's directly related to your sales process. The reason for that is so that you can use the profit and loss to kind of evaluate how efficient your sales process is versus the rest of your business. Okay, that being said, yeah, I would put booth rent under cost of goods sold because that's an expense that you are taking on in order to sell your goods. So that's part of your sales process.
Okay. And is it okay if we have been recording all of that as an operating expense?
Oh yeah,
Instead of
it's
cost of
like
goods?
it's not
Okay.
something you
Yeah.
have to do a certain way. It's just so that your profit and loss statement can be a little bit more helpful for evaluating your
Okay.
business.
And someone asked about vintage mall commissions, cost of goods. Now, this is tricky because it's similar to really any commission, whether it's eBay. I don't see that money ever. Like that money never hits my account. So it is actually not recorded in my accounting because I'm really just getting the net, I guess it'd be net profit after, like for example, when I get my check from my antique mall, they take off the rent and then they take all the fees out and then they cut me a check, and the check is what I deposit in my account. So in my accounting, now here's where using a separate software is so helpful, because I'm on Shopify and all my inventory is in there, and it's maybe similar on Genie, where I enter all of my sales, my tag sales for the month, and then I deduct the booth rental and the fees, so I can actually see that in the order itself, but that's not bookkeeping. Like on my bookkeeping part, the fees don't ever show up. Is there any different way of doing that, or?
Yeah, so I mean, I think for that particular situation, it kind of depends on if you're receiving a 1099 from
Oh.
whoever is collecting the money, and how they are making those, like how they're reporting gross revenue. So, strictly speaking, I if I were doing the bookkeeping, I prefer having the full sale price and then taking the commissions out, because on a 1099 K, which I don't know if the antique store would be required to do that. Just off the top of my head, I'm not sure. It doesn't sound like they are.
It varies. Different stores do it differently.
Gotcha. Yeah. So I mean, I think it kind of depends on what your store does, and how they're going to be reporting gross revenue. So I just want my revenue numbers to match up with any documentation I get. Um, yeah.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Someone did ask, does the system, I assume, does Genie make recommendations as to where to record these various type of entries? I'm not 100% sure, Catherine, what exactly that means. If you're talking about like transaction categories or what?
Yeah, I think that's probably what she's talking about.
Okay.
So currently, the way it works is for anything pulled in from our platform integrations, eBay, Poshmark, Mercari, we'll categorize that as shipping costs or transaction fees, listing platform fees. For everything else, we currently don't have auto categorization, but that is something that is scheduled to be rolled out. We're going to be doing that in 2 phases. So actually this week probably will be rolling out phase 1, where it's kind of more general. And then phase 2 will be a little bit later on. We're going to, I don't totally understand it. You have to talk to the developer about the magic he's going to do to to help with auto categorization.
Okay.
Awesome.
So then for someone who's like new to even tracking, say they've never developed a spreadsheet on their own, they buy or they subscribe to Genie, they're not really technologically savvy. Is there like something that might help them navigate through the program and like assist in, okay, like welcome here, get started by doing like XYZ type thing? Or like how does it work when you subscribe, like when you first sign up for it?
Yeah, great question.
Yeah, so this is actually something that we added as new feature, if you want to say, last year, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we got a lot of feedback from resellers, and just again realizing that accounting, it's a skill that you got to learn, right? And with that, it can be a little bit scary, and it can be a little bit challenging and stuff. So we have just done our very, very best with our software to make it so that we're not only giving resellers a tool, but we're trying to teach them and help them along the way to learn some of these skills, to learn some of the definitions associated with accounting and everything to help them better run their businesses. So around this time last year, we implemented a new feature where we have a whole setup guide. So as soon as you sign up, you log in, it's going to walk you through step by step exactly what you need to do to get all of your information in. And you also get to choose whether you're cash or accrual inventory. And so based on what you choose there, we're going to help you get set up. So it is still going to, require some time, like, yes, there is automation, but again, these are your numbers, and it's, even though a lot of reselling businesses are the same in what they track, everybody's business is slightly different, so you're going to have to read along with the guides and stuff like that. But yes, we do have a setup process, and it's going very, very well. Folks are finding a lot of help from it. So, and then also I'll just throw this out too, because people often are like, do you guys provide customer support? We're passionate about helping our customers. We answer support emails 24, well, not 24, but yeah, within 24 hours, 7 days a week. And so any questions that you guys have, if you're stuck on a setup step in Genie, or, down the road, you have a question about your bookkeeping in Genie, just shoot us an email, and we will get back to you guys within 24 hours.
Awesome.
So yeah.
Awesome.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
I popped up a question, write-offs. I feel like we've talked a lot about the expenses that we write off. I mean, all the shipping costs, the software, anything we do for business, mileage. Is there anything we forgot to cover? Even like square footage in your house, like our office, my office, the mortgage cost is a write-off, utilities, etc. That percentage. I can't.
Yeah. Before he goes, I don't know if you wanted to go down a little bit of a list, but I talked about our blog. We're actually going to be releasing a new blog post, hopefully March 1st. And it's going to be going through all of the reseller deductions. So, and it's a list style post.
All the most common deductions.
That's a great point. Yes, all the most common ones. It's probably 10 or 11 different categories of things that you can deduct. So if you want, go to our website and just subscribe, just enter in your email address if you want to get notified of that blog post. Totally understand if you don't want another email sign up list there, but you will get notified when that blog post is launched. But do you want to just kind of briefly go to the different things, or?
Yes, I mean, we covered a bunch of them. I don't think we've said mileage yet. So there's a standard mileage deduction that's very generous per mile driven for your business, which resellers, we source, we go to the post office. So you can rack up a lot of deductions that way. Also, you can write off part of your cell phone plan, your internet, because you're using that for your business.
Yes, that's huge.
Emphasis on part of, because unless you have a business only phone, you're probably also using it for personal. So don't claim all of it. Yeah, I think that kind of covers the biggest categories.
Even I do cleaning supplies, because like my copper cleaner, silver cleaner,
Yes.
Things like that. Light bulbs. I buy light bulbs just for lamps that go into my booth with a business expense. So it really adds up. And then for mileage, there's a ton of tracking apps you can use that do mileage. Honestly, I just have I use the notes app on my phone, and I do beginning mileage, end mileage, where I went, the date. I just type it out, and I have found, and then that gets transferred to a spreadsheet. And I have found that the low tech, I mean, it's just, it works for me. There's some that you have to like swipe personal or business, but like, I'm not going to remember to like go in and swipe.
Sure.
Um,
Or if you
anyways.
forget, I mean, you could always go on like Google Maps and then do your starting point and where you went. I mean, if you're going around town and all over the place, it's annoying because then you have to input every single location. But if you like, I don't know, I went to this one antique mall and it was 50 something miles away. Like I could always just go like Google Maps and then you can do your round trip, assuming that that's like the actual route that you took. So there's a little finagling in there, but just in case you forget, because I never remember to do that. I always end up going to maps like every time and I'm like, I'm spending so much time doing this when I could have either just taken a picture of my mileage in the beginning
Yes.
or like written it down.
Yes. You can do, someone said if we have standard trips, like I know it's 6.7 miles to my antique store. And then not, and also like, honestly, I work in a lot of antique store stops when we're on family trips and I deduct all of that. We went to Wichita this weekend, which is 2.5 hours away. And we have a place that I pretty much always stop. And when we left my friend's house, I started my mileage and then, you know, it's from to the store and then on to your next destination because it kind of is a little out of the way. You know, so we drove to that place and then we drove home. So yeah, the taking a picture is definitely the fastest if you got to start somewhere. So, okay. Let me, okay. I think we've pretty much answered this. It would be helpful to know what Genie does not do so I can plan for what components I would have to do on my own. I think we kind of talked, I mean, really it's just take photo receipts, some of the automatic categorization. I think we've kind of covered a lot of that. The mileage would just be something, but really your inventory is all in there. And I guess importing in, like if you're doing Instagram live sales, you're going to have to manually record those sales on your inventory. But if you're doing that already on a spreadsheet, then it's not integrated.
I have a question when it comes to tracking mileage or expenses when you're traveling for business and pleasure. So say you're going on vacation somewhere, but part of that time you're spending like days or hours or whatever, like in miles in like sourcing. Can someone expense part of that, like the sourcing aspect of it? And like to what extent? Like if you have to say I'm flying to California and I'm going to spend a few days with my friends or my family, and then like half the trip I'm spending sourcing only. I feel like it's a little hairy when it comes to that, but like how, like hotel mileage fees, like anything like that, can I expense any of that?
Great question. So this falls under travel and entertainment, which is a touchy tax topic. My first recommendation would be search for travel and expense guidelines from the IRS. They have a really great like frequently asked questions with answers to those questions. Now, for trips, if the primary purpose is personal, so like for example, you're going to another state to visit a friend, you probably wouldn't go to another state to source, right? That wouldn't really make sense for your business.
It depends, right? I've done it a handful of times, but in this case, that's not the primary.
So I mean, like, I'm not going to write off a plane ride when I'm mostly going somewhere to visit a friend.
Okay.
That being said, if I, maybe I drove my car there and I'm going sourcing, yeah, I can write off the sourcing mileage. But there's a lot of situational questions with this topic. So I would start with looking at that IRS FAQ sheet, and also it's always helpful to talk to your accountant about specific questions.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry, I know it's like one of those things that I've talked to, I guess, talk to your like tax preparer, your accountant, as well as looking at the IRS
This is
like information.
Gotcha.
this is where differing personalities really come out. We're sticklers or like asking that question, like where is the
Yeah.
line?
Right.
And I'm like, oh, the line's way back there. I already passed it. Like it all counts. It's like, oh, I'm flying to go antiquing with a friend. Yeah, I'm putting that on my business expense. This is where it's so hard because when you're so passionate and you love something so much, like I'm gonna go antiquing regardless, then the line gets a little blurry. So the IRS is not out to get us. That's the thing I keep like they are not standing over us with a stick watching for every little mistake that we're making. Like try to follow the rules. That's try to follow the rules. Someone
Mhm.
also asked about meals. Isn't there like a mileage? Like you have to be 100 miles away from home and you get to deduct 50% of it or something?
Yeah, so I mean, generally speaking, if you're in your immediate area, it's not something that you can write off.
I'm always like, Paul, I got Starbucks today. Paul, I got
But
Starbucks today.
you guys,
Yeah, I deducted. Paul, I got Starbucks today.
you have business meetings. But if you guys go out to eat and you're talking about the business, I mean, that's a business meeting, right? Oh my gosh, I need to get my husband to work for me.
We don't write off when we go out to eat together because I mean we're not going out like for the express purpose of business. If you're entertaining a client, that's a little easier to justify. And unfortunately, like with meals and expenses anymore, for most situations, the most you can write off is 50%. During COVID, they increased it to 100 for certain uh, expenses to try and help restaurants out, but that's come and gone, sadly.
Mhm.
Yes, I can see that. Okay, let me see. Okay, this should be a pretty quick one. How to log shipping costs for 2025 of open box for 2024 orders. This may not make sense to you guys. This makes sense. So open box is something like some sellers will, let's say in December, they had a live sale every week, and some customers don't want you to ship the box. They want to wait and just ship it once a month. But then that box is shipped on January 2nd. Oh man, Lauren, yes, we haven't even, sorry, now I'm reading the comment. Well, international travel, is the rule the same for meals, for travel expenses, etc.? Because some of us do source abroad.
Yeah. So the FAQ that I mentioned goes into depth a lot on that. But yeah,
Yeah, it's the same.
definitely.
Yeah, regardless. So that means you record the full amount, but when you do your taxes, you take half of that as a deduction. So basically the shipping cost, you ship it January 2nd. That shipping cost goes into your 2025 taxes, right? Like,
So the sale was made in December, then you ship it in
yeah.
January.
Mhm.
So you
Okay.
received the money in December,
Yeah.
and then the expenses in January.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is actually kind of going back to where we started with cash versus accrual. Now, most resellers overall are using the cash inventory method. You recognize your income when the money hits your account and recognize the expense when it leaves your account. So if that's what you're doing, like most every reseller, if not every reseller, then yeah, you'd record the expense in January. If you were doing accrual, it would be
Okay.
different.
Now there are some questions on here, guys, just so you know, like someone was like, how did you find your developer? Do you work with other accountants as resellers? If we're not able to get to those questions, it might be better to message them directly. Yeah, that would be great. And then someone also asked, and which we kind of answered this earlier, that it really helps to have an accountant that understands reselling and knows your state laws. I think that's really important because we're just such a weird business.
Yeah,
So
I will say, depending on the accountant, like they're familiar with all the states, like Courtney, the gal that I mentioned earlier, and there's a link if you guys need an accountant who understands reselling bookkeeping. Yeah, there's a link in our link tree in our Instagram account. But she helps resellers across all 50 states with taxes, and she understands all those. So yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. And then I have one last question up here, and I'm not sure what would be your recommendations for service and product sales business model. Catherine, you might have to message us about that.
So I think what she might be asking about is, would Genie work if you have service in addition to selling products?
Ooh.
Maybe I'm totally off on that, Catherine, but
No,
that's
that
something.
makes sense.
So you can track both in Genie. It'll feel a little, probably a little bit weird when you're recording your revenue for the service, because you'll have to create a sale platform, quote unquote, which is your, whatever your service is. So like if you have, maybe you're an influencer and you have YouTube income, you'd create a sale platform called YouTube. And then, there will be fields that on the sale don't make sense for your, January affiliate earnings. But you would just put a description in for what it is, put in the amount that she earns, and then record the sale platform. So you'll be able to track your income in Genie that way. But we are really focused on product. So that's kind of how things are set up.
So you can do a little bit of a workaround. Okay. All right. I think, and Nicole, are there any more questions on our sheet that we didn't cover?
I think a lot of it was touched upon already.
Okay. Oh, I do have a question. Does Genie work for outside the US?
No.
Okay, just US.
Yeah,
just
focus on US resellers. So yeah.
That makes sense because it's very specific. So, okay. Wow. This has been so good. Thank you. I appreciate your time so much because I feel like we went over so much information.
Yeah, happy to.
And I just, thank you so much for coming on Shop Talk. So just a reminder, if you guys want to try out my Reseller Genie, there is a code if you use Thrifty Whitney, and I can send links to everyone too. Again, sorry that my little automation wasn't working, but you can go on and try it and see if it's a good fit for your business. And again, thank you for answering all our questions. We will have a replay up on Spotify and YouTube and here on Instagram pretty quickly. I'm going to work on that right after we get off. If you guys do have questions, please reach out and let us know, because we are here to support each other and help everyone thrive and help everyone feel less stressed out about money and to not feel weird about money. I mean, we have to be able to go through this and understand it from all points. And then we will be sharing information about March's Shop Talk here. It's actually going to be just in a couple weeks. And Nicole and I are going to have a duet. I just don't know how to call it. It's going to be the two of us talking about Etsy. So that'll be a great kind of like our 2025 update for Etsy selling. And yeah, Paul and Faith, thank you again. We really appreciate you guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. I know you've all moved around your schedule, that this isn't usually the normal time that you broadcast. So thank you guys so much. We really appreciate that. And if there's anything else that we can do, just let us know, guys. We are here to help. So thank you guys so much.
Okay, great. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.